Hi, my name is Sarah James, and I'm going to talk to you today about the Hanif Peck design model for e-learning. So, what is the history behind this model? Well, it all started with two men. Their names were Michael J. Hanifin and Dr. Kyle Peck. They created this method in 1987. They said, perhaps the greatest advantage of computerized instruction over linear media is the potential for interaction during a lesson. This shows their heart behind why they created this method. They wanted it to be applicable for both novice and expert instructional designers. The newest and the most expertise of designers can use this method. It improves the quality and consistency of instructional design because of the fact that you can evaluate and revise throughout each step in the process, making ultimately the design process more effective and more efficient. How does the Hanif Peck design model work? Well, there are 3 steps: assessment, design, and implementation. And like I said, there's evaluation and revision throughout each of those 3 steps. I'm going to walk you through how the model works. The first step is a needs assessment. This is when you decide, what do my students need? You might give a pretest, you might look at observations, you might ask surveys, you might simply do a questioning activity. There are so many ways to formatively assess your students to decide what they need. Once you've done that, you're going to design something, some kind of activity that you think is going to meet those needs. This is where you're going to plan. You're going to do your storyboard, your script writing. You're going to design all the specifics. Once you have your ideas, you're going to develop and implement this. You're going to look at how the hardware specifications, what do you actually need to have to be able to make this possible? You're going to create the buttons, the structures, look at the animations, look at the graphics, the font, the color. How can I best engage my students to meet the needs? Now, as you can see, you have a blue arrow coming to all of those steps pointing to evaluation and revision. After each step, you can decide based on observation or testing that, that didn't quite work, so I'm going to go back and revise it so that I'm sure that my students are getting what I need them to get. That's the beauty of the Hanif Peck model. So if you're anything like me, you want to know before you try it in your classroom, have other teachers used this model? Well, good for you to know that not only did kindergarten teachers use it, but also 11th grade biology students used it. That in itself proves how effective this model can be. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the kindergarten classroom. They realized during their needs assessment that these students were loving gaming. They were loving using the computer for recreational purposes, but they also noticed throughout a lot of observation that they were missing a lot of questions in class about colors, shapes, and patterns. So they decided during their needs assessment that they were going to design something that would make learning this math concept more enjoyable. They created exercises that had assembling, matching, coloring certain objects. All of these things were done through a computer program. So once they designed it, they developed and implemented. It was called Pandai. It was an interactive gaming system. They looked at what colors and animations and graphics were most appealing to students, and they created certain buttons and menu pages, all something that made it very interactive and accessible for students. That's an example right there of the Pandai gaming system. After each phase, they evaluated and they revised, and they realized at the end when they gave a post-test that all of the students had increased their learning tremendously. So it was effective. In 11th grade biology class, the needs assessment decided through questionnaires and interviews that students were not learning what they needed to learn about the human reproductive system in the educational setting. They needed access to images, videos, animation in an educational way. So they designed a plan that would increase student accessibility to this information. The way they developed and implemented this was that they changed their whole structure of their learning to where they weren't just being able to use the computer during computer class to learn things like typing, but instead they reframed the structure of their day and they were able to use the computer inside of their biology class. This made all of this concrete information that students weren't understanding so much more concrete. It was abstract before, but now it was concrete because they could see it and they could research things in an educational way. Again, throughout each process, they were evaluating and revising to be sure it was getting the needs met of their students. So, here's a real life example. Let's think about how we could use this every day in an elementary setting, because that's what I would use. So I really love that this model is very much so constructivism based. It focuses on the student, not the teacher. It allows the teacher to see what the student needs, and then it revisits after each step what the student is still not learning or still not engaged with. So one example that I thought about was as a needs assessment, I would give a pretest on something like fluency of addition and subtraction facts. Based on that information, I would design something, maybe a combination of an interactive choice board or websites, timed Google slides that would practice the facts that I noticed they missed, things that I know they would enjoy in a game-like format, but they would access the needs that they needed. I would implement it and I would have a post-test given to see if that worked. I would talk to them and evaluate and reflect after each step to be sure that they were engaged and they were achieving to be successful. I would tweak it as necessary. That is the beauty of the Hanif-Peck design model. I really hope you've enjoyed learning about the Hanif-Peck model, and I hope that you implement it in your classroom sometime soon. Thanks for listening.